What is up, everybody? We are back again for another incredible and important episode. We're going to be talking about the top programming languages for you to learn to get the best job and the best market possible going into 2021. Now, before we jump on, I would really love if you could go ahead and click on that like button, subscribe if you've liked this video, obviously, and obviously that notification bell to be reminded or notified when this video and future videos are actually launched. Now, we're going to be basing these factors of these top programming languages based upon 5 to 6 key important factors. Now, let's start off to exactly what those are. We're going to be basing these on time to actually learn this programming language, time to build, job market trends, core principles, and demand supply curves. So these are the core main factors we're using when I'm going to go ahead and speak about the next programming languages you need to learn. Now, let's start off with number 5, to some people's surprise and not too many, is Java. Java is a classical programming language. It's one of the most important programming languages that exists in the world based upon the infrastructure it actually covers, all the way from stock trading to general reporting, as well as infrastructure in large companies. Now, based upon the previous factors that we said we're going to talk about, let's start off with point number 1, which is time to learn. The time to learn is actually quite high because of how Java actually is built as a programming language in comparison to others we're going to speak about. But the good part is it's got very strong programming principles which will actually help you. The job market trends is basically the fact that we've got 30% of all job postings based upon programming search in Indeed.com, Monster.com, as well as Seek.com as of today, which is, I'm recording this on the 28th of December, asking for Java as a key skill. The next thing we're going to be speaking about is the time to actually build a fully production-based application once you learn how to code in this language. And that, from what we've seen searching on the internet as well as from personal experience, is around 3 to 6 weeks, definitely on the higher side. But at the same time, it is a very enjoyable language. It's a fun language to learn, but more importantly, it's a fundamental language to understand core principles about programming. The other thing to mention is the demand to supply curve, which is an important factor to take in because it shows how much demand is there and how much of that demand is actually basically qualified by that supply. Now, that falls on the lower end because there are a lot of Java programmers and programmers that have experience for a lot of time, but that does not mean you can't actually get into it because the demand is actually quite high in general as it is. Now, you can look at a salary range of anywhere between 100 and 120k if you are getting into programming in Java, especially in the United States, Australia, and so on and so forth, but for mid to senior level engineer. Now, we're going to jump into language number 4, but before we do that, I want to put in a special entry for a language that is called SQL. SQL is not necessarily a language, as it's basically more to do with infrastructure and database management. It has the word language in it, and it is an important skill to have, especially in the world of data analytics and data management. It is a very key skill, especially if you want to be a backend engineer, and we saw that almost 40% of all language requirements in job search across Indeed, Monster, and Seek required, and almost 80% of all backend roles require some level of SQL experience. It's very important for you because it really helps you understand database structure management. Now, the downside of SQL, if you really want to learn it, is the fact that document database management, or basically non-structured databases, are picking up in popularity, but I do not see SQL going away anytime anywhere soon. And to be honest, I do feel like it is a good language to learn. It's very intuitive and very English-like, and it will help you also think better as a backend engineer or infrastructure manager if you want to go down that path. Now, that being said, let's go on to number 4. Number 4, to no surprise, and something that I think is a fantastic language, is Swift, which is basically the newer version of Objective-C. So Swift is basically the language that is used to build iOS applications. iOS, by far, as we know, is the most popular business model or operating system that is owned by Apple. Well, and I say in popular, I mean in terms of the usability of apps that are built on the iOS framework. Whilst Android does have a higher utility range in terms of the number of people using Android phones, the per capita gains, or basically how much people spend on iOS apps, is more. Now, the time to learn is actually quite low because Swift is actually quite user-friendly and beginner-friendly to learn. You actually learn some fantastic object-oriented programming principles. You learn structured programming, optimization, as well as key utilities and points of how the mobile phone works when you're interacting on a deep layer when it comes to things like performance management, screen optimization, and some key core factors when you're going really deep into the API of an iPhone. The job market trend is actually really good. You got 23% of all jobs posted on Indeed, Seek, as well as Monster.com at this day and age, which I said 28th of December of 2020, just a few days before New Year's, asking for Swift development. Now, if you look into the mobile version of it, you do not see this being replaced anywhere with respect to React Native or Flutter. If anything, it is a plus and an advantage if you know Swift as well as React Native and Flutter, which we will jump onto in a later stage of this video. Now, the demand supply curve, like I said, is actually quite high. There's a lot of requirements for Swift engineers, especially in the mobile world, and like I said, we don't see the native world going anywhere with respect to the hybrid world. And for a salary range, mid to senior level, after a couple of years of experience, you're looking anywhere between the 140 to 160 range based on average that we've seen across the internet. Alright, now we're going to talk about a very popular, cool language that I think has a lot of power and is really respected in the ecosystem, which is Golang, or Go, a language that is popularized by Google and is used across the world, and popular companies like WhatsApp, Netflix, Spotify, some big brands use it because of its concurrency power. Now, before we jump into Golang, let's talk about the key factors as to why I think Golang is a fantastic language for you to learn, and something that I honestly am really excited about given 2021. So the time to learn is actually in the medium range. I do think it takes a bit of time to actually understand how Golang works as a language, if this is obviously geared towards people who are learning or getting into programming. But if you are an experienced programmer, then the time to learn is actually quite low. But if it's not, I would say it comes in the medium range. Definitely easier than Java. I don't think it's easier than Swift, so to speak. The job market trends is actually really impressive. Almost 32% of all jobs posted on Indeed, Monster, as well as Seek are looking for Golang engineers, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. If you actually look at the Stack Overflow trends, you see that the Golang requirement is increasing almost every single month. The time to build a program application, especially in Golang, is not that bad at all. You're looking at about 3 weeks to get a fully scalable, deployable app into market, but that again comes down to each person's experience. But from what we've seen, 3 weeks is on average something very healthy for you to go ahead and get an app out to the market. Now, on the point of core principles, Golang is a statically typed language, strict programming, but fantastic principles, very performant, and something that you would always want to have in your backup, because everyone wants to have a Golang engineer, because everyone will scale their business at some point in time. The beautiful part about Golang is it actually does feel dynamically typed as well as compiled in runtime, but it's not the case. So you got the advantage of the developer experience, as I refer to it. Now, in terms of demand supply trends, this is by far the best language for you to learn, because there is absolutely ridiculous demand for this particular language with very little supply of good engineers. So when you actually look at the salary range, it's ridiculously high for good Golang engineers. So it's something for you to pick up as a skill, because it's not going anywhere given 2021 or even 2022. Alright, we're going to be talking about one of my all-time favorite languages, which comes in at number 2, and I think this is something everyone should learn regardless of where they are, which is Python. Python is by far the most user and beginner friendly programming language for you to pick up, not only because it almost speaks and reads like English, it's got some core functionality that helps, but also because Python is by far the most preferred language when it comes to artificial intelligence, which I'm very bullish on in terms of how the world is going and how you can stand out as a developer in the future. The time to learn is actually quite low. You can pick up Python very quickly. There's a Python course on Google via YouTube where you can pretty much learn all of Python in about 2 days, and I'm not even kidding. It's very possible for anyone to do that. Now, we're looking at job trends. Job trends are also fantastic. At this point in time, nearly 52% of all jobs ask for Python in some form and manner as a good to have language or preferred language when you're looking across Seek, Monster, as well as Indeed in Australia, the UK, and the United States. We're looking global as well. The trends also for Python is not going anywhere, as it is a preferred language, like I mentioned, for most artificial intelligence functionality, utilities, and use cases. The time to build is actually quite low as well. You can get a full-scale application up and going in about 2 weeks time. You can use backend engines like Flask if you want to go ahead and get your app running. The reason why I am bullish upon Python in general is because the need and requirement for automation, scraping, as well as utility management is really high these days, because people are looking to get rid of mundane tasks, and Python is one of the best languages for low-level management with respect to scraping, with respect to automation, with respect to managing tasks in general when it comes to an operating system level, or we're trying to, again, like I said, automate things. So Python is a fantastic language in terms of core principles, great data structure management, it's object-oriented programming. You learn a lot around how you write good code, because the program in general, or the programming language in general, really helps you focus on good coding practices, as well as lets you go down on a low level if you really want to go down on a low level. So you learn the actual principles of programming without necessarily, bypassing things. Now, when we actually look at the supply to demand curve, I honestly think that it's a fantastic place to be in, because artificial intelligence, like I said, is taking off all over the place, and as well as scripting and automation. So there is a massive demand for people who understand Python. Now, for Python engineers, people who are actually good at Python, you're looking at a healthy 140 to about 180k in terms of the salary range for mid to senior level engineer. After a couple of years, I'm looking 4-5 years time. So it's something for you to pick up now that will really pay off the dividends in a few years to come. All right, and we're in for the last but most important one, the number one language for you to pick up in 2021, and that is JavaScript. It is versatile. It is used both in the front end and back end, and it is by far the most in-demand language across multiple trends, as well as multiple factors that we've spoken about. Now, the first thing, in terms of time to learn, JavaScript is actually quite easy as a language for you to learn. Not as easy as Python in my opinion, but it definitely comes in that top 3 in terms of the languages that you can learn very quickly. Now, in terms of the demand of what JavaScript actually has to offer, the language itself is not in high demand, but because JavaScript is usually laced with the requirement of React, Vue, Angular, or Node.js for the backend, that's where you see a lot of the demand come in. Now, why I've always picked JavaScript as a language as my preferred choice of number one, not only because the number of jobs that people require and the amount of money they pay, but more so because it gives you opportunity. And what I mean by that is every few years or so, JavaScript introduces a new framework of programming language, programming environment. Not that I prefer that, but they do it, and that gives people, especially beginners, the opportunity to go ahead and compete with people who've got years of experience in a new programming language or new programming framework, I apologize, that can give you the advantage or head start that you might not have had in more classical programming languages like C++, or like I mentioned in the number 5 position, Java, even though I do think Java is a fantastic programming language to pick up. Now, in terms of the job trends, we've got 52% of all jobs that are in the job market right now across Indeed, Seek, as well as Monster, requiring some form of JavaScript in their programming artillery. And when we look at our overall job market salary, we're looking at anywhere between about 140 to almost 200 when it comes to certain languages, or frameworks rather, may I say, such as React and Node.js. And I think that's the other thing to mention with JavaScript as well. It is unilateral, or it's universal. It can be used both for front-end programming as well as back-end programming via Node.js. The other thing to mention is the time to build an application that you can actually launch to market is actually quite short. You're looking at the shortest time of them all, which is 1 to 2 weeks, both complete front end and back end. So I do think JavaScript is one of the best languages for you to learn going into 2021, just because the trends are not stopping us anywhere anytime soon. And kicker at the time to mention is JavaScript is actually also used for some artificial intelligence projects, because something like TensorFlow nowadays also has a JavaScript written or compatible library. With that being said, there are 2 languages that I do want to bring into mention as honorary languages that you need to look at if you're interested, and that being Kotlin, as well as the other one being Elixir. Kotlin, as we know, is now going to be the default programming language used in in Android, not iOS, in Android development. And Elixir is the other one that I've seen pick up a lot of steam, as well as developer experience lovability. People really have liked building in Elixir. So those are the 2 languages I would encourage you to check out if you're starting to program, or if you're interested into looking into something in the programming space going into 2021. That is all for this video. I'm very excited about the next video that I'm going to bring up, and I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you again, and have a fantastic day and a fantastic new year. See ya.